Sunday friendly service, Full Gospel Church International, a 5-star church, transforming lives on purpose. Ghana at 56. This is what brought me here. Now, this sermon was delivered by no other than Bishop S.N. Mensah, Reverend Samuel Mensah. And I listened to it and I was inspired. And I said, I want to talk to this man and find out what inspired him. Because normally, you listen to a church sermon and it's more spiritual. It's more very biblical. It's not very often do you hear from the altar hardcore patriotism being preached. And that's what got me here. Well, welcome back after the break. Hello, Reverend.
Good to see you, Nana.
Reverend, I was intrigued. I listened to the CD quietly one evening, and I couldn't stop listening. And I listened all the way to the end. And it's not the normal sermon I expect to hear from a preacher. In a church, you want to hear Bible quotations and fast a little bit more, get anointed, speak in tongues and go out there and do good. But this was basically telling people to become responsible citizens.
Right.
Briefly, but just hold on to that. First of all, Full Gospel Church. I want to find, we'll come back to this, but Full Gospel. Why Full Gospel Church? The name intrigues me a bit. Full Gospel.
Well, Full Gospel basically suggested that we pick it from Romans chapter 15, where Paul said, I have fully preached the gospel from Iconium to Lystra. And the full gospel is Christ the Savior, Christ the Healer, Christ the Baptizer, Christ the soon coming King. And so that is basically the totality of the gospel. So that constitutes the full gospel. And so that is where we pick our name from in Romans chapter 15, from 16, where Paul said, from Lystra to Iconium, I have fully preached the gospel.
Very good. I know a Full Gospel, and then there's the Full Gospel businessmen, and then there's a Full Gospel church. Yeah. And sometimes you ask, are they the same or are they different?
Yeah, Full Gospel Church International is totally different from Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship. Full Gospel Church International actually was started by the founder, the very Reverend Emmanuel Mensah, who happens to be my father. And that was in 1978. As a matter of fact, it transitioned from a prayer group to 1978. He was actually from the Presbyterian church background, and in 1963 he got born again through a crusade by T.L. Osborne, and then later on was transferred to Tema. But during that time he had a passion for prayers and for fellowship. At that time, Presbyterian church didn't have that room, for that kind of giftings and abilities. So around in the mid-70s to 76, 8, thereabout, they weren't too much comfortable, in accommodating that kind of move of the Holy Spirit. And that caused him to, exit out of the Presbyterian church, and that led to the birth of the Full Gospel Church International, which happens to be the first Pentecostal charismatic church from 1978. And so we are 35 years old, totally different from the businessmen fellowship.
No, but what intrigues me, are you saying your father?
Yes, my father, he planted the church of Full Gospel Church International.
And then you took over?
And then I took over, and as a matter of fact, history tells us that he's the first Pentecostal, independent Pentecostal charismatic church who handed over leadership to a son whilst he was alive for 10 years before he was called to glory. And so we are in our second generation. This is second generation leadership. And that will interest you. I'm even thinking and preparing for a third generation leader who will be taking over, in the next few years from now.
Well, I mean, that's a story on its own. But you see, normally if your father runs a printing press and, you became a second generation printer, it's normal. But this is a work of faith, not just necessarily work. So did you take over because of faith, or do you take over because, well, it's in the family business, I have to take over?
Well, first of all, the calling must be there. The desire must be there. The calling must be there. And apparently, I tried to run away from that responsibility. And at a point, my own dad said, look, he told my mom, don't push him. you know, if it's God's will, God will speak to him. So there was a time when, at the end of the day, I was challenged by Archbishop Duncan Williams, because he was actually more or less brought up from this area. My dad really challenged him, and my dad influenced him a lot. And it was my dad who really asked him, hey, you can go and start a work at airport area. So I took some inspiration from him when he came from the Bible school, because our church was a place where he was actually doing some aspect of ministry program. It was through that eventually I got convicted, you know, about the calling of God, and I responded and went through the necessary Bible school training and what have you. So I started as an ordinary pastor. I did my internship under him. And then later on, you know, I had to go through all the ranks that any other pastor would have. So I was not picked just because of a son. I was picked because of ability, the skill, the grace, and the performance.
Wow, that's impressive. Now, you know, there's this saying, even though not on record, that, you know, children or offsprings of the clergy are normally extra naughty. You know? Now, I don't know if the church members are watching this, but we need to go back to secondary school days. You know, were you know, a bit naughty?
Well, I think by and large, I happen to be, I'm the firstborn in the family, you know. So I happen to be gentle by nature. And sometimes people think I'm too gentle, you know. But in secondary school, I got into this SU, and so that really strengthened and sustained me as a young man. And basically, I think the SU influenced my life, and based on the Christian principles that I was brought up, that really sustained me. I remember one time we were sent, you know, during those days in secondary school time, you will go to the bush, you'll be asked to produce brooms. And whilst we were there, one student brought a leaf, and he said, well, Mensah, this is good. I said, what is it? And that was the first time I ever saw an Indian hemp. And then he told me, take it, you know, this will be good for you. I looked around, and we were just in the thick of the forest, about 5 students, and we were the only 2. I was the only person he was talking to. Then finally I said, you know what, I'm not going to do this, based upon the values that I had. When we went back to school, and I told the senior prefect that, listen, the next time they put us in groups, I wouldn't want to be with this guy. Guess what? About 8-10 years thereabout, I drove one time to UTC. At that time, it was UAC. And there was a security guy who opened the door. And lo and behold, who was the person? It was that guy. We call him Shakara. He was the person. He had just become like a watchman. He had been destroyed by that kind of lifestyle. And then he looked up to me, and I said, no, you know what? I can remember what you were trying to do and the negative influences. But based upon these, the values, that really sustained and kept me.
Wow.
You know, and one time, even when I finished O-level, they had to keep a position of the house prefect, you know, till I got back into the Lowasis, because the housemaster said, you know, he wanted me to be the house prefect, and they kept that position until I got, you know, to the Lowasis. And so that should tell you, well, I contributed a little bit in influencing, you know, students at that time.
Well, I mean, that's contrary to most of the stories of, you know, sons and children of clergymen who are normally a bit wild. So that was a good example. You know, that's a good example. Now, how many branches has the church got at the moment?
Full Gospel Church International, we have 40 branches, and we have 4 in Europe, in Spain, and in Italy. And since we took over, we have launched a vision this year. We have rebranded the church, and we have designed the vision. And now we have launched a vision of 500 branches in the next 20 years, with 1 million congregation globally of transformed Christians. The key word is transformed Christians. So we have launched a vision, 500 branches, 1 million congregation. If you ask any church member, and then you ask, you know, how many branches, they will tell you 500 branches in 20 years. Every young man, young woman, boy and girl understands that vision. And this year, all our churches are committing themselves to the planting of 30 churches, you know, across board. So that is what is driving this church.
Are other churches coming to learn from it? Because I can imagine it being a huge challenge, because there are other charismatic churches now who are really big, you know, but they are still within the first generation.
Right.
And I can imagine the headache they would have in terms of leaving who, as Rollins would say, hand over to whom?
Yeah.
Hand over to whom? I mean, are they coming to you to find out how did your dad hand over to you, and how is the congregation? Did they divide after when you took over?
No, interestingly, I proved myself. They also saw the gift and the ability in me, and at a point, they knew that the hand of God was upon my life. There were results that I was producing. There were other senior pastors who were ahead of me at that time. Some were not too enthused about it. So a number of them left. Some of them left because when they saw the red light, that definitely it is likely I could take over. So some were not too comfortable with it. So yes, some of them left. But I might say, by and large, there were people that my dad grew up with. And some of them were taking care of me when I was in secondary school, and they would give me money here and there to go to school. Interestingly, they all transferred the loyalty from my dad to me.
Okay.
Now, it's also, one has to also understand that whoever takes over also has a unique role, to be able to sustain the old generation and the new generation. That is key if you have to keep the unity of the congregation. And so I think that really helped. When I took over, what I did was that I needed to get people that the congregation would respect and appreciate so that they will come and endorse my leadership. And so some key people from the Pentecostal charismatic leadership, at a point in other programs, they will come and speak, and they will more or less endorse my leadership. So because they have high respect for these people, so at a point, Mensa Otabil came, Dr. Otabil came, Archbishop, Duncan Williams came, some key people, Bishop Dagibot Mills was around. They were speaking into the life of the leadership, and they really endorse, my leadership too. So because whenever a new leader you take over, you need people that society have great respect for, that they can speak to endorse, the leadership. For example, when Jesus came into the scene, before he could be accepted, John the Baptist was the man who was well known. Now, to transition from John the Baptist to Jesus Christ was a Herculean task, because society didn't know Jesus. They knew John. But John had to endorse Jesus, and he said, behold, this is the man who takes away the sin of the world. Now, hear him. And immediately, people started listening to him. So you need other leaders to endorse you. And that is what I brought into the scene. And that strengthened my leadership. So to come back to the question, yes, the first generation leaders of other churches today are looking up to us. They come, we share ideas as to how they can prepare and really exit their generation to the next generation. And I believe that we have a unique role to play in preparing these churches, so that at least whilst they are gone, their churches will be stable. Because leadership is not defined. A great leadership is not about the monuments you build, the monuments you leave behind, but it's as to what you can sustain, what can be sustained when you are no more. That is the key aspect. So it's not about the monuments you have built, but what would last when you are no more. And after the old man's demise, this church has been stronger than ever before. After his demise, we have launched a 500 membership congregation with 1 million, 500 membership branches with 1 million congregations. So what we are telling the first generation is about what would last when you are not around.
Reverend, listening to you, I realize how difficult it will be, because you see, if you were just manager of a soap producing factory, and they brought a new manager, we just carry on producing our soap. But this is where people actually put their faith in you. They confide in you. They come to you with their problems. And maybe it would have been your dad. But now he's moving. So now they need to build that confidence. And just as listening to you, I realize it will be a Herculean task, not even for you, but even for the congregation, that now I need to go to him with my marriage problems. And like you're saying, I used to give him money to go to school. Now I need to go and tell him that, my wife is insulting me. It must be a challenge.
As a matter of fact, it was a challenge. During the first 3-4 years of my leadership, when I took over the leadership, already I've been a pastor for more than 20 years until I took over the the leadership of the church. But when I took up the leadership, most of them were complaining. They were thinking, I was taking the church to a direction that they are not used to. So almost every time they would go to my dad and complain. But my dad did a great job. He never interfered with my leadership. He really never, he would once in a while call me or advise me. At a point, somebody went to him and said, look, we have changed literally everything. Because we at a point, the name was changed. We changed the vision. We started introducing new structures, what have you. But it was difficult for the church members. It wasn't easy. But the job of a leader is to move people from A to B. And anytime in your moving of the people, you need to let them know why you must get to B, why A is miserable, why it will not be appropriate for you to stay here, but there would be better. Gradually, people were getting and were buying into it. But I must say it wasn't easy because we inherited a congregation by our last, which was not a middle-class congregation, not highly educated congregation at that time. And now to real engineer, what we did was real engineering, retooling, redesigning. And so to really transform the congregation was a Herculean task. But, the pulpit has a critical role to really do that. But a number of our women at that time, just had a simple, basic education up to secondary school. But we gave them a vision of 10 years, that in the 10-year period, they should have a first degree. And to the glory of God, majority of them have the first degree, they have their homes, they drive a car, because we give them a vision that really sustained them.
Wow, wow. Now, co-founder, founder and CEO of Omega Leadership International.
Right.
And it says transform followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change to impact their world. So you are sort of you train people to become leaders.
Yes, indeed. I do that from the corporate institutions, from the political department, political realm, the academia, in the religious group. I speak on different platforms. So I wear a couple of hats. In the church, I speak as a pastor. I take up training programs in the corporate institutions because what I have come to realize that leadership is the key. Yeah. Like Professor Stephen Adair would say, is the cause and everything is the effect. And leadership is influence. The problems of our society, the problems of our organization is leadership. Everybody by and large, Nana, has a leadership, what I would call a leadership spirit in him. But not everybody has a leadership ability. Every human being has a leadership spirit in him. In other words, everybody by and large was born to be a leader. But not everybody has a leadership ability. To explain to you, leadership spirit is like the hardware in a computer. You buy a computer, it can be i7, it's a great computer, it's a great hardware, you open it. But the leadership ability is the software that the computer needs. If the computer has to be very effective, if you can get the maximum use of the computer, that is the leadership ability. So there is a leadership spirit in a doctor. There's a leadership spirit in a politician. There's a leadership spirit in a CEO. But there is no leadership spirit in ability. If they don't have that leadership ability, it's just like a nice computer you have spent time to buy, but you don't have the software to maximize its use and to make good use of it.
Can we train somebody to get the ability?
We can. And that is the key thing that Omega Leadership stands for, to really train people that they can get that leadership ability. Because the leadership ability is about planning, is about having vision, moving people. Wherever there is movement, there is a leader. The job of a leader is to transform people. Move them from the life they have to the life they could have. In other words, they have a kind of life that is not pleasant. But you as a leader thinks that, look, they must have a particular quality lifestyle. Your job is to transition them to have the life that they need to have. And once you get to that there, then that there becomes their new here. And then you move them again to another better life. When you get there, that will be, let's take it B2. B2 becomes their new here. Then you move them again to B3. So leaders are always improving the lives of people. And unfortunately, that is what is missing in our society. That is what is missing in our country. I am a strong believer that about 80% of the politicians we have today, unfortunately, are not leaders. They have the leadership spirit, but they don't have the leadership ability.
We'll come to that because that's what brought me here. But before we go there, another question I want to find out is, if you look at lives and society and an environment, and considering that a huge majority of us are Christians, I think there are two things that we have in common, maybe school and the pulpit. So who is not telling us what to do? Because our lives out there is not very Christ-like. You know, maybe you can speak to that.
I think the challenge we have is that the pulpit has, by and large, failed to translate the preaching into the life of the people. And what I normally say is the pulpit has failed the pew. Why am I saying that? You know, the job of the pulpit, because Sunday after Sunday, you have people literally coming to church. You don't pay them to come to church. They come to church. How can people come to church, and yet when church closes, they defecate anyhow, they litter around, they choke our gutters, they drive on the wrong shoulders of the wrong shoulders of the road, and eventually there's total law and order is broken down. But these are the same people who come to our churches and fill our churches and sit and listen to the word. What is happening is that most of our preachers are not translating the preaching of the word into the day-to-day lifestyle of our people. Most of the preaching is most of the preaching being done in Ghana and most part of the world is diagnostic preaching and not prescriptive preaching. Now, what do I mean by diagnostic preaching? Diagnostic preaching is basically telling people what is wrong with them. You know, that they have a problem, they are sinful, they are not doing well. Of course, you and I know people, when people come to church, they know they are sinners. I don't need to remind them. They know they are living a struggling life. I don't need to remind them. But what they need is that, yes, I am sinful. I am a sinner. I have a problem with immorality. I have a problem with not organizing my life well. But how do I get out of this problem? So most of the preaching should be prescriptive. And Jesus' preaching was 30% diagnostic and 70% prescriptive. If you look at the apostles, 30% diagnostic, 70% prescriptive. So people are not, the pulpit is failing to translate the preaching into the day-to-day life of our people. That, for me, is the major fundamental problem. Until we do that, we will have a bunch of people who call themselves Christians, but the Christian faith is not being translated at their workplaces when they go there. For me, the pulpit is in my church. For the doctor, his pulpit is in his consulting room. For the accountant, his pulpit is in his office. For the engineer, his pulpit is in wherever he is. That is the kind of message we are giving to our people. Take your pulpit to where you are. And one of the things we have encouraged our people, we say every human being born of a woman came into this world with four things. A gift, we call it the GAP T in this church. G for gift, A, ability, P, profession, and T, talent. Every human being born of a woman has these four abilities within him. Now we are supposed to use these four things to serve God and humanity.
Stay put. We're going to go for a quick break, and once we come back, we want to find out these four things, and then you listen carefully and find out what four things you brought to this earth, and make sure that one day when you meet your maker, you can tell him, you know what, I used up all my four things that you gave me. It's been an exciting chat. I can't wait to come back. Stay tuned. We're coming straight back. Well, welcome back after the break, and we're going straight to the four things that you brought. I want to find out what I brought here. Probably, interviewing. Maybe that's one. I want to find out the other three. Reverend, just before we went to the break, we were talking about every human being born
of a woman
has four things.
Yeah. We have G for gift, A for ability, P for profession, and T for talent. In other words, every human being came with a gift. Being born poor is not your fault, but to die poor is your fault. You came into this world, you could be poor, but God gave you a gift. That gift must be turned around to bring some income and to improve your life. That is why, so God never made anybody poor. So we have a gift, you have an ability, you have a profession. There is a profession born within you before you started school. So once you go to school, whatever subject you desire to have and whatever profession must have a link to your passion, a link to your desire, a link to why you want to study math, why you want to study physics. It has something to do with your desire. Then the talent. So when people come to church, they are supposed to use this gap talent to serve God in the church. So for example, if I have nurses and doctors in this church, what they do is that they must use that gift to serve God. What do you do? Some of the things we do, the first Sunday and the last Sunday of every month, the first Sunday and the third Sunday of every month, we take the BP levels of our church members, because BP is one of the silent killers. These are nurses. So they set up the table, church members take up their BP and they are advised. Maybe your BP is high or what have you. You know what they are doing? They are using their profession to serve God. And then when they go outside the church, they must use it also to serve humanity and to make the life of people better. So we challenge people that use every ability, your gap T, for these two purposes, God and humanity. And that is the whole essence of mankind.
Let me, I really like this idea of the nurses helping each other, because what I've noticed is that as the Christian society, I think if you look at all societies, Freemasons, tennis players, golf players, they help each other more than Christians do.
Yeah.
And I want, but you would have expected Christians to be, more at will to help each other than so-called people who were of the world, rather than, so you go to a golf member, and if he's doing a party, everybody will turn up. If he needs a business and there's somebody within the club who has links to that business, they immediately connect. But Christians are not very quick into this. So I was happy you mentioned the nurses coming and, this is what I can do, so I can help you with what I can do. Why haven't we caught on to help each other?
Nana, people are not. They become what the pulpit makes them to become. People literally are not, in a sense that they can't be what you want them to be until you deliberately, consciously, and on purpose make them to be what you want them to be. And that again comes back to the simple thing that the pulpit is not consciously and deliberately transforming people. Because if we challenge people that, listen, whatever gift you have, make it available, use it to benefit humanity, people will begin to do that. Because if you have a lawyer in your family and you have a legal challenge, that is why the lawyer is there, to help fix issues. If you have medical problem, why would you have a medical problem when you have a doctor in your family? He must be able to serve. And for example, when you are sick, you and I, the first thing we do, we go to the doctor. But when the doctor is sick, who takes care of the doctor? Why wouldn't the doctor take care of himself? He can't, except another doctor takes care of him. When you have a legal problem, whom do you talk to? A lawyer. When the lawyer himself has an issue with the law, and he goes to court, another lawyer defends him. The principle is this: your gift is not meant for you. It was meant to bless another person. So whatever you have is not for you primarily. It was meant to bless society. Once we understand that, then we stand on a better ground to be able to be a blessing to one another.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Ghana at 56, this is what brought me here. And was basically calling civil society to wake up and not to sleep. And it was done, I think, the Sunday after 6th of March with you theme Ghana Day. It was, I felt it was unusual, because as a man in the pulpit, I was expecting more, Holy Spirit this and Holy Spirit that. But it wasn't that. It was basically telling the congregation, go out there and be responsible citizens. I don't think many churches, do that. How can we get many churches to follow that suit, to tell us to go out there and be responsible citizens, because it's all, God's work in one way or the other?
Nana, I have been very passionate about Ghana, and something drives me that I don't see why, as a country, we are where we are after 56 years. When we look at Malaysia and what they have done, we had independence in March, Malaysia had independence somewhere in August, and yet between us and Malaysia now it's like night and day. And so I strongly believe that something totally is missing in our system. We have launched this Ghana Day program, and we started this almost about 5 years now. I am hoping it will be institutionalized, that the Sunday after every Independence Day, can you imagine every pulpit dedicate that Sunday and speak on nationalism and patriotism throughout the entire Ghana? I guarantee you, year by year, gradually we can transform and shape the direction of our country. So I am calling for, and it's like a crusade I have embarked on, that it will become an institution whereby the Sunday after Independence Day, every pulpit in this nation will not preach on any other thing but upon something that has to do with national development, patriotism, and nation building. And can you also imagine, during the week, these are some of the things I've been propounding, during the week of the Ghana Day, all our streets are decorated with the national flags. Our cities and our regions are decorated with the national flags. Businesses are decorated with the national flags. And commercial entities are promoting, sales, Independence Day sales, 20%, 50%, what have you. All the media houses are speaking on nothing but national development. Maybe let's give the entire month of March to national development. Stop anything about politics, from the radio, the TV, national development, citizens' responsibility. Why is the pulpit Sunday after Independence Day? On the national issues, on the regional basis, district basis, the nation is clouded in national colors for 1 month. Believe you me, in the next 4 years, we can move people to become committed, dedicated, and very patriotic, one way or the other.
Reverend, talking about patriotism, I mean, we've just come out of an 8-month grueling trial. We've waited for a verdict for 2 weeks or so. The verdict has come. But the next thing on the front pages now is 2016, from both angles, from the president, from the opposition. The next message out now is 2016. So I think your idea about patriotism could have really helped, because is it not a bit too soon to be talking about 2016?
Nana, it is very extremely unfortunate that after going through these problems, and naturally it brought the nation to a standstill, and thankfully we have crossed that path. All that we need to do is national development. We have industrial unrest. We have, screws under trees, these doomsaw issues, no quality water. These are basic things that we need to commit ourselves to. And so if these two political parties are thinking about 2016, it's extremely unfortunate. And I think society must be very hard and condemn that. Our government must start thinking about what do we do to improve the life of our people. But you see, I have said somewhere that politicians by and large do not develop a nation. And so if we leave any nation, any national development to the politicians, we will belong to history, because politicians by and large, the first day they come into office, the next day they are thinking about what to do to sustain them in the next 4 years of election. So national development must be the responsibility of civil society. We must push the politicians as to what we want them to do. If they are not doing what we're asking them to do, we should get them out of the system, put in another group of people, because we have entrusted into their hands the national resources of the nation, the mineral resources of the country, because all of us cannot govern from the Flagstaff House. So we have entrusted leadership into selected few. And what we are saying is that, look, lead this nation, improve the lives of this nation on our behalf. So unfortunately, society has become docile. Society is sleeping and not being active to drive these politicians. But no nation has developed under the hands of politicians. History will tell you, from the 15th century, 14th century, from the Stone Age to the Industrial Revolution, will tell you that it took civil society who were active that demanded national development. And for me, that must be what we should do. But it is very unfortunate, and society must condemn that, because that should tell you that our politicians are not thinking about the development of our country.
How to stay in power has become too key in politics.
And, because, again, like I said, 80% of our politicians are not leaders. So it is a non-starter. I mean, they are just not leaders. So they don't know. They have become firefighters. They wait until problem comes, and then they go back to try to solve problems. And sometimes they explain problems away. One key principle of leadership is that leaders solve problems. Leaders get things done. They fix problems. They don't explain problems. I never voted you into office to come and explain problems to me. I voted you into office to fix problems. And one of the key principles in leadership too is, when you take up any organization, whether CEO of a company or a president of a nation, the first year of your leadership, you could hold your predecessor responsible for whatever you've inherited. That is what leadership principle teaches us. But from the second year, you take ownership. You are now responsible to fix the problems. So if people are in their second year, third year, 4 years, and they are still blaming the previous government for what they have inherited, like the 4-year SHS problem, and they are saying the reason why we now have a 3-year stream, 4-year stream was because of what happened 6 years ago, it's extremely unfortunate. Leaders don't blame people after 3-4 years when they have taken over. You now the problem is now yours to fix it. And that is what we must be able to tell our politicians, that stop looking for people to blame, fix the problem, because that is why we put you there.
Full Gospel Child Development Center, because I was going to talk about Sunday school.
Yeah.
I was thinking, have we focused more on the main church and missed our Sunday school where we treat them with kiddie gloves, Jesus this, Jesus that, and we don't preach patriotism at that age. So maybe by the time they get to the main congregation, they've learned too many old tricks, to be taught new tricks. I don't know. But then I saw this and I thought, let me find out from you what exactly you do with the Full Gospel Children Development Center.
Yeah, the Full Gospel Children Development Center is a program where we have given scholarship to 200 children from the community, who we are taking care of them right from class 1 up to SHS level. Majority of them come from, they are not even members of our church. They come from the community. Some of the parents are, non-faith, from other religions. And it's a matter of helping the society, helping the children get a better life. So we bring them here, and every Saturday we give them food to eat, and then we provide them with extra education program. Once every 6 months, we do medical health screening for them. And, we sometimes pay their medical bills. Some of them have, like HIV, victims. We manage them. We do that in partnership with Compassion International, in Ghana here.
Okay.
So this is about to improve the life of our people. Also, for the children's service, like you said, yes, there is a problem where we try to also let them understand that they are coming up, they are Ghanaians, they need to commit themselves. But I think we need to do much more to be able to, for them to imbibe this nationalism and patriotism in their spirit. But if we have to move and get people to become very patriotic, we must launch a program what I call socio-cultural transformation. And that is what this country would need, socio-cultural transformation. Because most of the time, these environmental cleanliness and what have you, one time the president himself launched a new program that cleaning the environment. The previous president, the late Aliyu Mama, launched a crusade of indiscipline. All these ideas were good, and I knew that they were not going to succeed. And you know why? Because there are major key players when it comes to attitudinal change. If you get them out of the equation, no legislation has transformed the attitude of our people. Okay? Education informs. Prison will reform you. Legislation will cause you to conform. But it is only the gospel that transforms your life. So the key principle is that if we want people's attitude to change, there are major stakeholders. And the religious leaders are major stakeholders, because they will help transform the attitude of our people. Government cannot sideline them when they want to bring socio-cultural transformation. If I were running the country, what I would do is I will engage these religious leaders. I will partner with them and tell them that in the next 5 years, this is where we are going when it comes to sanitation, law and order, cleanliness, and discipline. So we will want you to translate your Sunday and Friday for the Muslims, Sunday for the churches, what you preach into the day-to-day lifestyle of our people. So that in the next 5 years, this is where we want to go. We want to bring a holistic transformation in the lives of our people. So these are major key stakeholders that you cannot sideline. Unfortunately, they are coming up with wonderful packages, but they have ignored the major players who will help them transform the society. And if we get them, believe you me, 5 years, we can transform our society from becoming a lawless institution to a society that believes in law and order.
Reverend, I mean, you've spoken so profoundly and everything, but I mean, when you wake up at 4 a.m. and you're driving to work and you're flicking through the radio channels,
yeah.
I mean, even though you can't judge, there are some characters that are on air that you wonder, you know, what book are they preaching from? Indeed, are they preaching the gospel or are they just preaching? Yeah. And there seem to be many of them about, you know, charlatans, if I may call them.
Right.
So how does, and they also have a congregation.
Right.
You know, so how does society deal, you know, with this growing menace, if I may call it?
You see, fortunately, well, we have freedom of worship, and so you cannot probably enact a law to ban certain group of people. But I think one of the things we can do is to those people who are not in an organized and recognized councils, like the Christian Council, the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Churches, and other Christian organizations, we need to get them on board and help them to understand how to translate the preaching of the gospel into the day-to-day life of our people. So we have a responsibility towards that group of people, because if we leave them, by and large, people are believing what they are saying. And so we need to make sure, because sometimes we have resigned to faith that we don't do thinking and we think every problem will be solved by prayers. But I keep challenging our people. I mean, Ghana prays more than Japan. Ghana pray more than China. Ghana pray more than Germany. We almost every Friday we are holding all nights. Yet, which of the two countries are poor? You know, or poorer is Ghana. So prayer alone hasn't solved our problems and can't fix all our problems. There is a scripture in the Bible, if you will permit me to quote in Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20. It said, "Unto him who is able to do more than we can ask or think, according to the power that is in us." Hold on. More than, who is able to do more than we can ask or think. Which ask means prayer. Thinking is using your brain. God put both prayer and thinking on the same level. So one hand represents prayer, one hand represents thinking. You put it together, it's a symbol of prayer. So you are doing prayer, you are doing thinking. And unfortunately, the majority of our Christian people are doing a lot of thinking, a lot of prayer and less thinking. And that is the problem we are having. So people are not thinking to solving problems, and they think prayer will fix all problems.
For most preachers, it is good for them to have a praying congregation rather than a thinking, because then the idea is that, no, hold on, he's going to be independent and might not need me as much. He's not going to come to me every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So they are probably not teaching people that, no, for this issue, don't come to me, go and solve it.
Yeah. You are very right. And that is the unfortunate thing, because we want people to be dependent on us. But that is not what Jesus Christ, taught us and the Bible teaches us, and the Christian faith should be. People, you must give them tools, equip them, then they will be able to improve their own lives. They must not always depend upon. They don't need to call you, well, I dreamt in the morning, I woke up and there's a cockroach in my bedroom, and so, what do I do? If I'm traveling, do I have to consult you? Do I have to travel? No. I think we are moving, it's beginning to be like fetish, in the polished sense. But that is one of the things that we should start teaching and begin to bring some of these wrong things into light, because we must equip our people that they will become better people, and they will know how the scriptures, whatever the scripture says, to improve their lives. These are the things that I think when we do, we can equip our congregation. Our people, sometimes people too by nature are beginning to be lazy. Instead of they doing a lot of thinking, they would think that prayers will fix everything. And we challenge them that, look, the head is not meant to carry load. And most often, every time people grow up, they're always carrying things. Instead of, the head was given to us to think and to solve problems. And that is very critical if we will have to improve, the lives of our people.
women will always be the majority.
Yeah.
Anytime, you go into a church, I don't know about your congregation, but mostly you find that women are more, and especially the dodgy ones, if I may call, you find women fall more prey to them rather than men. Why is that?
Well, women are very emotional. Women, it's very easy for them to release their faith in when it comes to spiritual things. They believe things easily. Men by nature are very analytical. If the thing doesn't make sense, he wouldn't take it. But for women, they receive it with their heart first before they start giving it a serious consideration. So women by nature are people who are inclined to a lot of spiritual things. And unfortunately, because of that, they have become vulnerable. And of course, there are preachers and church religious leaders who take advantage of this vulnerability and put fear. Unfortunately, see, most of the things that is happening, people want to put fear in the heart of our people so that forever they will constantly depend upon their religious leaders. And the Bible tells us God didn't give us the spirit of bondage to fear, but the spirit of power and of love and of sound mind. So we need to begin to teach our people that, listen, you can depend upon God. I will equip you, but then you need to use the tools to improve your life.
You're a man of the clergy, and one thing that our society have developed is that when you speak anything patriotism, you are indirectly speaking against whichever government is there at the time. Because anytime you cry foul on any social amenity, it means that if it's now, then it's the NDC government. If it was 8 years ago, then it was Kufuor. You then realize there's a portion of the society who will be a little bit aggressive and might come on the attack. Oh, why is he talking like that? Why didn't he talk? Aren't you worried, with your position, especially when you pour out for Ghana? Aren't you worried that they would launch an attack on you?
No, I'm not worried in the least because it's all about Ghana. First of all, I'm a Ghanaian, okay, and I have responsibility to Mother Ghana. I have responsibility to transform, to contribute to the transformation of the country. So, by and large, the problems of our society is not just a problem of one individual. It is collective ownership. We had schools under trees during the days of Rawlings. We had the Dunso, what have you. In Kufuor's government, it was the same. Atamil's government is the same. In John Mahama's government, it's the same. That should tell you that the problem we are having goes beyond political or partisan problems. It is a national problem. And until we understand that, this nation will just be moving in circles. And that is why people must begin to rise up above partisan politics and begin to demand accountability, people who will drive our nation. The starting point for this country is what we call national vision. We don't have one. We don't know where we want to move, where we want to go to in the next 40 years, 20 years from now. And Ghana is just like a flight. I call it, GH, 1957 flight, GH 1957. Can you imagine you have a great pilot, great crew, 350 passengers, Airbus, and then the captain tells you, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board. This is flight GH 1957. We are going to fly between now. We are going to United States, and we are flying through, through Africa, North America, to Europe, and then to New York. However, we don't have an navigational system. I'm going to figure out how high I'm going to fly, and I'm going to find out which direction I'm going to take. If you were probably sitting in that aircraft, I bet you, you will get off.
Can I get off?
Exactly. And any nation without vision is like an aircraft without a navigational system. You are literally going to crash the aircraft. And that is exactly what Ghana is doing. So we are growing and developing at snail pace. Regardless of the captain, that is regardless of the president or the political color, this country will not move, and develop until we have a national vision. We will be developing at a snail pace. So it's not about a politician or a political persuasion. It's about the national development of the country. And some of us, we are calling for a national vision, which is the starting point to drive this nation forward.
Right, Reverend Samamensa. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
My joy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much too.
Right Reverend Samuel Mensah. I'm glad I came. I'm glad I followed my intuitions to speak to the guy who delivered the message on this CD. And if nothing at all, I walk away knowing that being a Christian is not only being spiritual, but it's also a way of life. And that indeed, if you're a Christian, Muslim, or any follower of Christ or God, you should do your duties properly as a citizen. Thank you for watching PM Express Personality Profile. Until next Friday that we talk to a different personality, have a beautiful